Welcome. I'm Michael Bickert. Thanks for joining me today as we explore concepts with the objective of improving your management skills and growing your business. I'm not even going to mention it because it would just be silly for you to show up without your notepads and your pens handy, knowing that I want you to make a commitment to yourself to jot down notes, to jot down some sort of action item that you can implement in your business today, knowing that's what this is all about, implementation to drive your business forward. All right, I want you to be more effective as managers, so we will continue with today being our last in the series on waste, on Muda, and this is the bonus video. This is on the 8th form of Muda, which was not part of the original 7 forms of waste that were identified in the Toyota way, the Toyota production system and lean management that I mentioned on the last one. And by the way, if you haven't seen our playlist and you haven't gone through this chronologically, that's okay. It's not necessarily important that you follow along the exact way. I would absolutely recommend that you go back and watch all of them. Start at the beginning, get the idea of the general idea behind the premise of waste. And we have a couple of videos that are more overarching on the concept, and then this playlist on the 7 first forms, and then this 8th bonus form of waste. As I say, the bonus ones, the drill down, the deeper dives, those in the series are not chronological. It's not necessary. I did end intentionally the last one on overproduction, which was considered the worst form of waste, and that's a good segue for me to tell you that actually, in my humble estimation, I would tell you that today's topic, the underutilization of talent, those members of your team and what they can contribute, the underutilization of talent is in fact the worst form of waste. So let's dive into it. Just like the other ones, I'm going to bring notes up on the screen. Those notes will be made available to you. There's a link in the description. You can download these. So that's not the notes I want you to take. I want you, as always, to reflect upon how can you become more effective as a manager. Frame this through the context, through the lens of your business, and how do these things apply. So I'm going to start off by sharing some initial premises with you that relates to today's specific topic, today's form of waste, and then we'll look at some of the causes and examples of the same. We're not going to take a real strong look. I probably will mention from time to time how you might be able to mitigate against things, and inherent in some of my comments will be mitigation or strategies to avoid this. It should be somewhat intuitive for you, and it's a little, although I would argue it's mostly universal, the concept, it is a little business or industry specific how you would mitigate against these things, but most of all I would say it's pretty obvious as we go through them. All right, so I'll bring these notes up on the screen and we'll get started. Okay, let's get started here with the original premises. These are the things that you need to grasp, you need to accept in order for this concept to make sense. I think these things are inarguable. I don't think you could really debate me on all but maybe 1 or 2 of them. And if you do, then leave a comment and tell me why you wouldn't accept one of these premises. All right, the first one I have here is that no one is omniscient or omnipotent. You are not all-knowing nor all-powerful, okay? Hopefully we can all agree on that. No one is. Despite the fact that you're the manager, you're the boss, you don't know everything and you can't do everything. The next premise is everyone possesses knowledge and talent beyond what is required to perform his specific role. All right, so we've said 2 sort of, the 2 sides of the first 2 premises are different sides of the same coin. Nobody knows everything, nobody is all powerful and can do everything, but each of us know more and can do more than what is required just for our specific role. Number 3, organizational resources are finite. Now a little sidetrack here, a little digression is what I'm trying to say. I initially put on the notes here, resources are finite, but I don't really believe that. I've heard, and it was best presented to me many years ago by someone, an economist from Penn named Paul Zane Pilzer, and he's a great entrepreneur. And he did a presentation on how all resources throughout human history are not finite, they're not scarce, they're abundant because due to the advancement of technology, we actually replace or redefine resources such that a resource becomes where it's not sought after anymore. Long before we terminate our supply, exhaust our supply, we move on to a better resource for accomplishing the same thing. And he went through a lot of those. So I do believe that we live in a world of abundance, but your organization, your company, has a finite number of resources. I think we can agree on that. Also, organizational resources, therefore, should be leveraged to maximize return on investment. Not controversial. I think that's pretty obvious. And yet, we don't always act in the way that would indicate that we view something as obvious. Number 5, specialized knowledge and experience is an asset, but can be a liability when myopic. So we agree that if you are working on the front lines and you're specializing in something, you do that every day, that experience is a great asset and you will have special insights that you can share with others in the organizations because of that experience. But it can be a liability if you can't see the forest for the trees because you're so nearsighted on it. You are failing to see other things that somebody with a out-of-the-box perspective might. And that goes on to our next one. Unique perspectives often consider novel solutions to problems. So let's not be tricked by the premise that only the person who has the experience and the in-depth knowledge of a particular process in your production, in your business, can create the solution. It is in fact oftentimes that the unique perspective, an outsider, somebody who thinks outside the box, can come up with a novel solution and propose something. You go, yeah, that might actually work. Why have we never thought of that? Because you're myopic, because you're too close to the situation. And number 7, the last one, improvement needs to be decentralized and managed from the bottom up. This is really important to understand. This is the one that some of you might argue with me on, or at least you are behaving in a way that would indicate that you don't accept this or you've never learned this. Decentralize your improvement. It all starts with decentralization of your idea generation, and it is the idea that I'm underutilizing my talent by trying to come up with all the improvement initiatives myself, or just my management team, the top dogs in the company, so to speak. You want everyone to do that, and it should be managed from the bottom up. Not only should the ideas be created on the front lines, but they should be implemented on the front lines. In fact, management's job becomes more one of making the final decision on the deployment of those necessary or requisite resources to implement the ideas that are proposed on the front lines. And there's a number we could spend, I'm sure I've got at least one video on this, but there's a number of reasons for that, not the least of which is if you try to come up with an idea yourself and mandate it, you are very reliant on really good communication skills. You got to share that vision, and then you've got to try to get people to accept a change that you are proposing or you are mandating, and it's just not that easy. Those who run big organizations particularly understand this. Whereas if the masses came up with the idea and they are pitching it to the management team, to the top dogs, and you are saying, okay, you know what, we trust in you, we're gonna empower you, and we're gonna give you the resources to implement that. You don't have to worry about someone sabotaging the idea, dragging their heels, that attitude where people are like, oh yeah, management came up with another one, we'll just wait for this to pass and we won't really have to be stuck with this change. That's a big one. But also you get that cumulative creativity and problem-solving ability, the cumulative intellect of your whole organization when you do that. And then I think the biggest one is your time is finite. You should be spending your time in management making big decisions that guide the ship in direction, and making sure that you can deploy the resources, make sure that the resources are available and best managed, best invested to get the best return on your investment. Whereas your team comes up with the improvement ideas based on their day-to-day experience, and they actually are responsible for implementing implementing them. If you tried to implement all the ideas that were proposed to you, maybe you did a great job, you got halfway there, you decentralized the idea generation, but then you tried to do it all yourself, you'd run out of time very quickly. But your team, each of them can help implement the ideas because you've got that many more hours. It's just a simple math game. All right, let's move on to the causes. And there are, as I was brainstorming the causes, there's no shortage of causes for the underutilization of talent in your organization. Let's go through them. The first one I have up there is arrogance. And I hope this isn't the case. Sometimes it sounds, a little off-putting to maybe think of yourself as being arrogant. Everything I put on the board here is kind of a two-way street as it relates to causes. So you can think of this going in both directions. But I've got a little quote after each of these causes to give you pause to reflect on maybe the attitude, the idea of what the person might be saying or thinking that's associated with these causes. So with arrogance, we only need our best and our brightest to solve these problems. If I'll get my management team, myself, I'm the smartest guy in the room, we can handle this, we can get it done. That kind of arrogance will really detract from you getting your best results. Another cause of underutilization of the talent in your organization, the worst form of waste from Michael Bickert's opinion, is a flawed paradigm. You may believe it's management's job, or your entire team, remember I said it's two-way, your team may believe that it's management's job to solve a particular problem, to do a particular task, or to strategize, or whatever the case may be. So this idea that this is management's job, we will do the hard work, we will do whatever this happens to be, we will do this problem solving. I'm not sure what it is each and every time, but the idea that this falls on management's plate and management only is often a flawed paradigm. And it goes both ways. Both management sometimes think that, as well as the front lines and the rest of the team may think that. And you should redefine whose job it is, whose role it is, what your culture is as it relates to utilizing everyone's talents. The next one is ignorance. And I've got here, I don't know how to, or I don't know why, I don't know. So the 5 W's, I don't know where. Basically, an ignorance of how to best take advantage of all of the resources that you have on your team, making sure that you're utilizing the talents to the greatest degree possible from everyone. It can be just that maybe you're ignorant to the problem as being even in existence. You didn't realize that you were running all these years, you were operating your business in an environment where you were just pigeonholing everyone. And you were like, okay, well, that's your job, you stick to doing that, and this is my job, I'll do this. And you have titles or job descriptions, and everybody does that. And you were ignorant to the adverse way that this affects your business, how detrimental this is to your business, or you may simply be ignorant to how to change it and what you should do. So we're going to touch on some other ideas that may give you some insight into how you might change it. Culture is another cause of the underutilization of talent. And I've got there, no one cares what I think. So you may have the culture where you actually have never reached out to your people and asked them what they think. You've never sought input from the masses, from the other members of your team, your other stakeholders, and they have this cultural attitude that you just don't care. And there's a whole bunch of things that go into culture as it relates to this and other things. I've just got one there that, if you don't have the culture instilled in your organization where people know that you not only want it, but you expect people to use all of their gifts, all of their talents, all of their knowledge to help drive your business forward, then you're not likely to get it. It starts with creating a culture, and there's all sorts of ways to do that. Misaligned objectives is another cause. The quote I have there that people may be thinking is, don't we all want the same thing? Have you ever heard people say this? Well, we all want the same thing, and yet you're puzzled why people seem to be at odds with one another, or they're not cooperating. And that always comes down to, that's just a symptom of a lack of alignment of objectives or incentives. And remember, in a business context, typically that comes down to remuneration or the way someone's performance is measured. So take a look at those things, and if you truly do all want the same things, which you should, that should be your goal, then make sure you align those incentives by making sure that people aren't having opposing remunerations or opposing ways of having the performance metrics, of having their performance metrics measured. Okay, I struggle with that one, but you get what I'm saying here. Make sure that you align objectives to the greatest degree possible. We have an entire video on that, at least one, and you should look at that. Structured representation may be lacking, so I really think ideally you should have some sort of structured representation throughout your organization. I have some great ideas on how you could set that up that I've taken from Dan Larimer and his Eden concept. But and in my management history, I set it up differently before, but essentially people should know that there is someone to go to. The quote I have on the screen there, I'm not saying anything to them, you tell them. So you may have somebody in your organization with a great idea, but he is very shy or introverted. He's the type that does not want to rock the boat, and he's not likely to share that idea with anyone. But if he knows, well, there is a structure, a formal representative of my department, of our role, of my sales team, whatever it may be, and I can go and report this idea to him, and he will bring it to the management team or the decision makers, then that may be all that is needed there. So structured representation, give some thought to implementing that. Communication obstacles. How can I be heard? If your people don't even know the best way to communicate their ideas to the masses, to you, to the decision makers, if they have a great idea and they just need a little bit of money, or they need a little bit of help from the others on the team, they may need a little procedural change to implement that idea, but they don't even know, how could we get this? Depending on the size of your organization, this can be a really big problem, or maybe not such a big problem. If you have a really small organization and you have good communication skills between you and your team, then and maybe that team is only a few people, 1 or 2 or 3 other people, and you talk each day, this is not likely to occur. But the bigger your organization is, the more communication obstacles creep up. So find mechanisms through which you can make sure that the communication flows and that people appreciate it. Defensive leadership is a cause of underutilization of talent. I just get in trouble when I suggest this, that, or the other. So are you open to having ideas and criticism? Remember, ideas are often framed in the context of some sort of critical thinking, some criticism. A person is saying, I don't know why we do things this way. We should do them that way. We should change this. And if you were the person who put something in place, then you might be defensive. And what is your personality? Do you take that well? Do you appreciate that? Do you give the feedback to people? Hey, thank you very much for that feedback. Let me share some information with you why we do things that way. You might lack a little bit of the understanding and the background, the history of how we came to do things this particular way. Or are you like, yeah, why don't you stick to doing what you do your job, let me do mine. Defensive leadership can really stifle any kind of progress. The next one I have up here is lacking self-awareness. And I've got, I can do that, or I can't do that, whichever the case may be. Sometimes you're really good at something and you didn't realize it, or you don't think that it could be that much of an asset to an organization, so you fail to step up and volunteer those services, to suggest that. And I'm not meaning volunteer in the sense that you wouldn't get paid for doing something. I just mean that you would speak up, and you may fail to speak up if you don't think that it would be appreciated. You don't realize, because of a lack of self-awareness, that you're really good at something. You might be the best within an organization. Or the opposite, where you think you can do something. Maybe you're the boss and you're like, look, I got this, I can handle this. And you have this, maybe combined with the arrogance or a lack of self-awareness, where you think you're good at something, but you've got somebody else on the team who's far better at it and willing to help with that. So try to think about things. I've got a video on people exploring their habits, or not their habits, I guess, but their skill set and everything, and brainstorming that, and then sharing that throughout the group. There's all sorts of ways. When you consider these causes, try to think of the opposite. What could you do to mitigate this in your organization? Poor implementation of remedies. So if you decided, hey, we don't want to underutilize the talent, and you put together a strategy for making sure that you make the best use of all the talent on your team, and we tried it, it didn't work. Well, it could be just that you had poor implementation of the remedy you put in place. Maybe you didn't have the best idea of how to do it, or maybe you didn't stick with it long enough. Maybe you had bad PR. People didn't know, oh, management put that in place where we could give suggestions and we could actually get resources to fix things within our departments and that kind of stuff. I never even knew about that. Where was it? In the company newsletter? What do they do? Send out an email? Oh yeah, I've got 100 unread emails from management in my inbox. These types of things, poor implementation. You've got to try this and you've got to refine it, but you've got to make sure that your entire team is involved and give it the time as necessary. Next thing up here I've got for causes, all comes down to the big one is poor human resource management. Now, if you'll indulge me by not skipping too far ahead and reading too far ahead, let's go through these slowly here, because you could argue that many of the points I've made already are poor human resource management. I would agree with you. But these are the main ones as it relates to human resource management that are the reasons why we underutilize talent in an organization. First of all, it could be the talent acquisition to begin with, a lack of recruitment diversity. I like to recommend each time you're going to hire somebody, try not only to hire for the role that you need, but hire by bringing in talent that you lack in your organization in a specific area that your organization would benefit from. So maybe you need somebody to be a receptionist, to answer the phones, but you lack a little bit of accounting skills. Maybe you can, when you're acquiring your talent, when you're recruiting, you can look for somebody who has both. And often it doesn't occur to people during the recruitment process. And that example I gave might be, too easy. I think what happens here is we don't have a really good awareness of what talent we have on our team. So this goes back to maybe doing a brainstorming exercise, finding out what you lack and what the competition might have. Maybe you lack design skills on your team, somebody with an eye for aesthetics, and somebody who could be very critical of your branding messages, your marketing messages or whatever, because you outsource all of that and you think, well, my agency that handles that for me is responsible for that. But imagine now if you're hiring for it might be a production, a frontline worker who's doing something involved in your product, but they also have an artistic background. Well, that's what I'm talking about here when you want to make sure that you have some sort of diversity. I'm talking about diversity of talents and thoughts and creativity, not diversity in the woke sense where you're hiring based on trying to make sure that you fill some demographic profile for your organization. I'm talking about skills here. All right, the next one in poor human resource management is clarification of expectations or lack thereof. Your input is critical. So make sure that you are sharing that with your team. Are you telling your people that not only do we have a mechanism in place where you may make suggestions for improvement in the organization, in fact, it is our expectation that you do that. You need to clarify your expectations of people. And let's say you've taken the time to implement some strategy company-wide that people can give you their feedback, you decentralize this, then make sure that you clarify in your expectations of people, we want you using this. We expect you to submit at least one improvement initiative per day, per week, per month, whatever it happens to be, whatever your expectations are. The next one is training related. So make sure that you're doing some cross training, some role sharing. It is a really good way to get your talent to be utilized to its fullest potential when people understand at least what other people's challenges are and what is involved in another job, because when they're doing it, they may be able to say, hey, I've got some ideas that might improve the way you guys are doing things over there. So maybe I'm hired for a particular department, that's where I specialize in, but occasionally I go and as a fly on the wall, I spend time in another department and we communicate where I can give some input. Think of these things. Those aren't typical in an organization, but they will make you more effective as a manager. What about tools? Example I have here is formal idea, input mechanism, and process. Are you lacking that entirely? Are you expecting people to write down or email you something when they have a suggestion? Or do you have a much more formal and, say, automated process? Like you have a tool, this is where you input your ideas, your suggestions for improvement, and then this is the process that automatically occurs. It automatically goes to the representative who represents your part of the business, and they automatically, once a month, appear in a meeting with the decision makers, and they discuss again, I'm not going to go into a deep dive as to how you would do this, but you can certainly reach out to us. We can set it up for you, Bickert Management, or you can leave something in the comments, or you can ask me to do a separate video on how to do that. But you should have some formal tools, mechanism, and a process in place for people to get their ideas out there and to volunteer to do more than what their role may be requiring. The other one is the resources needed to implement ideas. So are you, through your human resource management, are you making sure that people have all the resources that they need to do their job or to implement ideas for improvement? That is one of your 4 obligations, to hire the right people, to clarify your expectations, to make sure that they have the necessary resources, tools, and training, and then of course accountability as well. Those are your 4 obligations. So I think it's often the case that management fails to provide resources that people need, and they just sort of assume that's the way it is. And nobody tells them, hey, make sure you let me know if you're lacking something so we can give that to you. We want to give you those resources that you need. Measurements of sources, frequency, and impact of ideas. So it always comes back down to measurement with me. I know that because measurement is so important. That which is measured improves. But I want you to measure specifically the sources of idea implementation, the sources and the frequency that you get ideas and people volunteering to implement improvement initiatives, and the impact of these ideas. So what impact did it have? Did it save us $10,000 last year? Did it generate more sales? And how many more sales did it generate? You've got to measure. Accountability, commendation, or the administering of consequences as appropriate. So make sure in your human resource management that you are holding your people accountable. So make sure you're patting them on the back when they are doing a good job, where they are utilizing all of their talents, and make sure that you're administering consequences when they fail to meet your expectations. So earlier on, I said you've got to clarify your expectations and tell people, hey, we expect you to be improving your area of the business, and we expect you to be weighing in on other areas of the business and giving ideas. And when they fail to do that, follow up with them, give them a little bit of coaching, find out why they're not. And it may be related to one of these other areas of human resource management or one of the other causes we talked about. All right, how about some examples? I want you to ask, as we go through these examples, I want you to ask, how are you using your stakeholders? Are you using the various stakeholders in your business? Now, specifically, I think when Toyota defined this 8th form of waste, they talked about team members, those people on your team, but I would expand this to other stakeholders. It could be even your customers, your vendors, your suppliers. It could be your local community. Just think about how you're using all the people who have a vested interest in your business succeeding. And as we go through these, ask yourself that question time and again. What about your business plan and your strategy? Here's an example of where you can use everyone, as many people as will weigh in. Remember, it's not a democracy. You're not stuck with taking the input of everyone. You can discard those things that don't, that thing I said about self-awareness. Maybe somebody's just not good at something. They think they are. They give you some great feedback, and you have to say, oh, thank you very much for that. We're not going to, implement that idea at this time. In your planning, in your strategizing, your growth initiatives, all these kinds of things, are you getting everybody involved? What about your projections, your forecasting, targets, budgeting, whatever term you use? Are you decentralizing that? Are you getting all of your talent involved to the greatest degree possible? And I realize sometimes it's not practical to get everyone involved, but the people who are interested, you should not only tell them that that you appreciate it, that you do expect it, that you want anyone who has something that they can contribute to the success of your business, you want them to contribute it, especially your team members, of course. Improvement initiatives. So we broke up into categories, all of the various things, and you might have something related to facility, you might have something related to IT technology in your business, you might have something related to sales and marketing, or whatever the improvement initiative is. Have you sort of broke up and created teams that work on that, and that it's scheduled as part of something that they do on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis? And anytime you have an improvement initiative of any kind to do with your business, you want as many of your stakeholders involved, and you want to make the best use of all the talents that are at your disposal. Problem solving, same situation, any kind of problem solving. Vendor or supplier selection. Are you the one? Are you in management? Are you, as the boss, the person who's choosing all of your vendors and suppliers? What input might you get from your team if you included them? What about other suppliers, competitive suppliers that, just decentralize, again, is the idea. Customer service, customer support, customer concern resolution. This comes down to empowering your people. You may have talents within the organization. A person who isn't in customer service may actually give you a great idea for how you could be doing a better job with customer service. Or they could actually say, I'll take that on. I can think of some examples where we took people who were not ordinarily frontline personnel, but they had special insights into what was causing the customer problem or the customer concern, and we made them part of the communication channel. We brought the customer and that person together, and they were able to better explain than somebody who is, responsible for the support ticket. Maintenance, repairs, cleaning. Can you use talents of your team to do some of these things that are required in your organization? Are you outsourcing all of it? Is it possible that people could tidy up their work areas using some 5S principles, and you can make use of their talents instead of directing financial resources to do some of these things? Talent acquisition, and what I mean is input on hiring. So maybe you're not the best at hiring. Maybe your talent acquisition or recruitment process is a little labored, and please reach out to my company and let us do that for you if you really struggle with this. But sometimes it is a good idea, once again, I keep using this term, decentralizing. You're getting other people involved who may do a second interview or third interview, and all of a sudden you realize, that person has a real knack for pulling out of people in an interview, in the context of an interview, the notions that I typically miss. I'm not good at that part. So again, make sure that you are looking to others in your organization and creating these opportunities, letting them know that you appreciate it. And if it's not working, that's okay. You don't have to involve someone the next time, but at least try. For those of you with really small organizations, then this is probably really good, especially if you're hiring somebody, they're going to work hand in hand, side by side with someone else in your organization. Let them have a little input. Let them sit in on the interview if that's appropriate and there's not privacy concerns or whatever, or maybe a second interview, and they can give you a little bit of feedback before you make those hiring decisions. What about major expenditures? Maybe you're going to do a facility upgrade, or you're going to buy some tools or equipment. Are you letting your team weigh in on this and share with you some of their experience, some of their talent, some of their knowledge? Remember, you're trying to tap into everything that you have in your organization, all the knowledge, all of the intellect, all of the experience, and all of the talent. And you would sometimes be surprised where you're going to get that from. And when you're going to spend a bunch of money, this is a great way to involve other people in your organization to make sure you don't make a major mistake. Any kind of production or execution. So your people, they work on the front lines of your production or the execution of your service. Are you making sure that you allow for not only feedback and idea generation, but implementation of these changes from everybody in your organization? Is there somebody on your team who could be involved in production in some way that you never thought of? Because, it's just not out there. People aren't giving you ideas. What about company events? People have talents. Maybe you're going to have a talent show at a Christmas party or something like that. Are you involving? How are you using your stakeholders to contribute towards the success of your company events, whether this is a sales meeting, a convention, a social event, the summer barbecue for the company or the Christmas party or what have you. How can your people contribute to your company events? Policies, processes, procedures. I like to focus on best practices. Get other people involved and have them share ideas, communicate, and come up with the best practices. You're going to be able to utilize talent better that way. Mentoring, onboarding, training, supervision. Do you think of this as all your job? We have a whole video on how you might be able to implement a little bit of decentralization, let others on your team contribute toward this, and you can utilize your talent better. Recognition, commendation, celebration of success. Again, this is an idea that a lot of people think, well, that's management's job, and it may be management who's most effective at execution, but again, I have a video on this as well, but we have ideas where you can have other members on your team put forward and tell stories in front of a group about how much help they got from this person. These types of peer commendation and recognition are often very effective and another way to utilize the talent of your organization. Special projects I have here. So nothing specific. If you have a special one-off project, look internally first and find out, do you have some knowledge, some experience, some talent underutilized on your team that might be able to help you bring that special project to fruition? The degree to which you get a culture of this expectation throughout all of your organization where people know that their contributions are valued and will be appreciated everywhere in any way that they contribute, then it won't be such a secret. You've got to find out what people are capable of doing. So there was a lot there, a lot to digest. And actually, I thought this would be one of the shorter ones, but you can appreciate the value. You spend so much money, you invest so much in your human resources, you don't want to underutilize that talent. There might be something that it never occurred to you that you could use to create value in your organization for your products or services, for your customers, and you've got somebody that's willing, and the expression goes, they had my body for the last 20 years. If they had only asked, they could have had my mind as well. So make sure that you're leveraging the ideas and the concepts we discussed today to get the most out of those valuable resources, which are your most important resources, those human resources, your team members and the other stakeholders. To the extent that it is practical, involve your other stakeholders like customer feedback and things from your vendor or your surrounding community, these kinds of things. I hope you got something out of this because we went on for quite a while, so that's where I want to leave it today. Please leave a comment that we can all learn from, because we need to learn from one another. Perpetual refinement.